Every year around the trade deadline, a star suddenly becomes available.
If you were worried about Kirby Yates, worry no more. It appears the deal is going through.
The Miami Heat are motivated to trade Jimmy Butler.
It was an absolute classic. Baylor fought till the end.
The Dallas Cowboys made two massive hires on Tuesday.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
Kentucky basketball was down several players. They went on the road. They needed a win, and they got one.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
78-73 is the final score. Cats now 15-5, 4-3 in SEC play. Huge game for Kentucky beyond the arc. We said it coming in, and I continue to harp on the fact that this team, when they shoot the ball well, they're very hard to beat, and they needed to have a big-time shooting performance in this one. Look at what Kentucky did from beyond the arc, both volume and efficiency. 12 made threes on 24 shot attempts, good for 50% from beyond the arc. Tennessee, they made 11 threes, but they had to take 45 to get there, 24.4% for the Vols. We talked about it in the preview episode. This team gets a lot of their points from beyond the arc, and they'll let you take some too. And for the Cats here, it was very interesting how in the first half, Tennessee, we said coming in, they'll let you take a lot of threes. I expected them to try and maybe buck some of those trends, maybe run Kentucky off the three-point line a little bit. They didn't do that. They let Kentucky inside-out style basketball kick things out, let Almanor, let Jax, let Brea, they let them take threes, and Kentucky made them pay. This was the performance that we were looking for when we walked in this preseason and said, okay, this roster has shooters all over the place. You had 3 massive performances here from beyond the arc from Robinson, Brea, and Almanor. Again, we're going to continue to break this one down here on today's show. Again, thank you guys so much in the live chat. We're talking here about the 3 different big performances, and let's go ahead and dive into, I think, the biggest one here, the guy that I said had to step up the most, and that was Jackson Robinson. Jax obviously had a little bit of a shooting slump to start the year, but over the course of the last several games, he has lit it up from 3. He was only 6 of 16 from the floor in this game, but 4 of 9 from beyond the arc. He also had 4 rebounds, an assist, and a block in this game as well in 34 minutes of play. Plus 20 in plus-minus box score. He was the second on the team in that category. This was so great to see Jack step up when Kentucky needed him to do a little bit more than run off ball. He ran the offense, I think, pretty well in this game. Again, not necessarily high assist numbers for the Cats here. We'll get to what Amari Williams did in this game in a second, but Jack still ran things pretty efficiently, I would say, and he obviously had those 4 threes go. Huge stuff from Jax. I'm super impressed with the way that he's kind of churned things around, and you can see he's got a little bit of his confidence going, which was huge to see in this game. Taking a look at the live chat here, Ito, the F&D, said, Lance, you should check my comment on your preview video. I called it Carr would play. We'd hit shots from the outside. We would win. And that's what I was saying in the preview episode is like, look, if Kentucky's going to win this game, it comes down to essentially one thing, and that's whether or not you hit those outside shots. Of course, again, Kentucky did 12 threes, and a lot of you are talking in the live chat about Amari Williams, which we'll go ahead and get to his performance here. Look, there have been a lot of different games here where Amari has just not played the way that you would like him to. He's not played as strong as you would expect a guy to play at his position. You expect a little bit more muscle. You expect him to dunk the ball when given the opportunity. You expect him to defend shots more consistently, and gentlemen, he did all of those things in this game. He had a double-double, 10 points, 15 rebounds, 13 of those on the defensive end of the floor. He also had 4 assists. Yes, he had 3 turnovers, but man, he had some really nice passes in this one. Again, some really nice rebounds, playing physical down low, boxing out, taking control of things, plus 20 in the plus-minus box score department, and this was the story of the game. It was Amari and Jax, and it was essentially your starting lineup. If you want to go and look at Stats Broadcast, you can actually go and look and see everybody's plus-minus box score, and you can notice that every single player that came off the bench tonight was negative. Every single starter was either even or positive, with Kobe Bryant being the only person there at a net 0. That's what you want to see whenever you are shorthanded and you have to make adjustments and you have to put certain players in the clutch. They come and they play a lot of minutes and they go out there and they contribute consistently. Gentry says in the chat, here's hope Jax is okay, even though he was limping. He had some sort of issue there towards the end of the game. I think he's okay, especially considering the way that he was playing towards the end. I mean, he was moving around pretty okay. But yeah, it was really good to see him performing. Hopefully he is okay. Also, Gentry notes Noah was a huge spurt of energy, more of an impact than Perry and Chandler. And if you want to go actually look at the negatives here on the plus-minus box score, Colin Chandler -1 in 15 minutes, Trent Noah -1 in 9 minutes, but he was 2 of 2 from the floor, had a big rebound there in the early on, hit that 3 obviously in the second half at the top of the key. This is what you want to see out of your freshmen, coming in, providing valuable minutes, hitting shots when they're open. I was really impressed with the way that Trent played. Travis Perry -6 in 5 minutes, which again, I want to reiterate, try to play him as little as possible. They only played him 5 minutes in this game. I didn't think he would be able to come in here and make it work, and he honestly, he really didn't. But talk about players that kind of surprised me here, and that's Brandon Garrison, -16 in 16 minutes of play. He had 2 points, 2 rebounds, an assist, no turnovers, no blocks, no steals. But man, a weird game considering just how things have been trending for both Amari and Brandon Garrison. So yeah, just a really, really good all-around performance from the Cats. Owe took a hard fall too. Somebody notes in the chat, that's right. Owe had 14 points and 6 rebounds in this one. He was somebody that you expected to be, again, one of Kentucky's most consistent players on the floor in terms of scoring. He is not what you are looking for from beyond the arc. He's kind of struggled in that department as of late, but man, he can drive in and get you a lot of different buckets inside the paint. Obviously, you would have liked to see some of those jumpers go down, but unfortunately they didn't. He got to the line, 9 free throws in this one. If he had cashed in a little bit more consistently, maybe you see Kentucky close this one out a little bit earlier than they did. 16 of 24 from the line, 15 of 22 in the second half. This was an extremely uneven officiated game. I thought the officiating was pathetic, quite frankly. You don't often get to see all of this muscle, all of this physicality, all of this back and forth with no calls, and then you see these rebounds, or you see Ziegler try and drive, and he gets called for, or excuse me, he draws all of these bull crap fouls. I did not see what the officials were seeing tonight. Frankly, I thought it was pathetic, as it usually is. The crew was just not very good. But Kentucky was able to fight through it. They were able to play more defense without fouling in the second half. I was very, very impressed.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy. Used to go to comedy shows all the time. Me and my friends in college used to go all the time. It's a blast. You don't even need, alcohol. You just go and have fun and laugh. It's a comedy show. That's the whole point. Just go have fun. Gametime has a new called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Every year around the trade deadline, a star suddenly becomes available.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast.
Huge smoke that turned into a raging wildfire around the NBA. It really started building up steam. I first heard about it about mid-morning, let's say 10 o'clock this morning. And let me make something perfectly clear. Shams Charania of ESPN sent out the tweet that put the entire NBA world on notice. But we knew about this in Sacramento for hours before that tweet went out. And there were guys here in Sacramento, local media members, that were all over this from the start. Damian Barling from ESPN 1320, all over this story from the start. And there are others, and I won't name names specifically because I don't know how much they want to be put out there, but others who did a phenomenal job in Sacramento getting this information. People with their feet and their ears to the ground, doing the busy work to find out as much as possible. I tried to find out what I could. Others tried to find out what they could. Damian went with what he had. And it was, again, hours before the news dropped. So I'm not saying this to be like, oh, look at Sacramento's better, or look at ESPN 1320, or these people are better than Shams. That's not my point. My point is, this is what we have local media for. And Sacramento, y'all are blessed with tremendous media members. I'm not talking about myself. I'm blessed to work with these people and call them colleagues, call them friends, hell, call them competition. We have so many amazing people in this city doing tremendous work covering the Sacramento Kings, and today is a perfect example of that. I wanted to make sure I emphasize that first and foremost. But let's talk into dive into what's real. Okay, this is what's real about what is happening today. The Sacramento Kings have had conversations, or at least a conversation, about a De'Aaron Fox trade. That's what sparked this entire thing today. General manager assistant general manager Wes Wilcox informed Rich Paul, De'Aaron Fox's agent, that conversations were being had. There is no demand anywhere. De'Aaron Fox has not demanded for a trade. Clutch Sports has not demanded that the Kings trade their client away. And the Sacramento Kings are not actively shopping De'Aaron Fox into a point where they're putting him on the trade block and saying, we want to move this guy. He needs to be gone in the next 9 days before the trade deadline. It's over. It's done with. The Fox era in Sacramento is over. None of that is happening. Need to make sure that is abundantly clear. None of that is happening. But conversations are being had, and we've gotten to a point where all sides are aware of it. Fox and Clutch Sports are aware that this was a possibility. They've been aware of this. They've been having conversations with the Kings organization for months about what Fox is looking for in a potential extension. And an extension is not dead. Guys, De'Aaron Fox has not said the bridge has not been burned. There is still a chance that Fox could remain a Sacramento King long term. I think it's very unlikely at this point. I think the writing is on the wall, and it's been on the wall since Mike Brown was fired. I'll get into that more in the next segment. But the Fox era in Sacramento is not done with. This is not the same thing as what's happening with Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. The Kings are going to suspend De'Aaron Fox. Fox is not going to refuse to play and start sabotage the team. That's not what's happening here. But Fox and his team are aware of what's possible. The Sacramento Kings are aware of what potentially faces them. And all sides are doing their due diligence here. In reality, nobody's really doing anything wrong. The De'Aaron Fox and and Clutch Sports have made it known that they have an ideal destination. And I've seen some people talking about it openly. I've seen multiple reports not naming that team yet. I'll say this. Think about what up-and-coming team in the Western Conference could really use a point guard to pair with a generational big man talent. If you don't know the answer to that, I don't know what to tell you. Or if to put it in emoji terms, Fox emoji, alien emoji. That's all I need to say. Again, other people are talking about it openly, who that team is. If you can go to them if you really can't figure it out. But this is a team that as soon as we even humored the idea of maybe De'Aaron Fox could be available, this is one of the first teams that everybody thought of because of what that team is looking for and a potential star pairing, right? So you should be able to connect the dots. This is a play right out of Clutch's Sports, their playbook, right? Saying a team, their client has an ideal destination or destinations to try and influence a trade to a spot where they want to go. This does not mean that the Sacramento Kings have to abide by that request or that demand. They don't have to. The Sacramento Kings are going to look to make the best move for the Sacramento Kings. They're going to try to find the best deal possible that they can get for De'Aaron Fox. And now that there is an ideal team in mind, there's two ways to look at it. In one sense, you could look at it from a perspective of, the Sacramento Kings lost a little bit of leverage because other teams know that Fox only wants to go to that particular team. But other teams who are interested in Fox, the other side to look at it, other teams that are interested in Fox, like a Houston Rockets, for example, they're now on a clock and they know they have to beat a clear suitor if they want to actually get this deal done. So this is the play that Fox and his camp and Clutch Sports have. The Kings don't have to follow it, but obviously the most ideal situation for everybody is the Kings trading Fox to that team that he wants to go to, and the Kings getting worthwhile assets from that team. You can tell by me openly talking about Houston that Houston is not that team. And Houston is the team, when I talk about assets, Houston is the team that immediately comes to mind about this is a place that you could really get some good young pieces in a Fox trade. But Houston's not that team. So again, that doesn't mean a trade to Houston is dead. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen. But if the best case scenario for everybody is for the Kings to trade Fox where he wants to go and kind of honor him and what he's done for Sacramento. If they do decide to trade him, again, this is not a demand from Fox to be traded. It's not an end-all be-all. But if they do decide to trade De'Aaron Fox, the best case scenario is trading him to that destination and getting as good as you could possibly get from that team. And it has to be enough. I'll talk about that more later on in the podcast when we talk about the Kings having to get this right. But here are teams to keep an eye on. The Bulls, the Heat, the Rockets, and the Spurs. Those are the four main teams I would say keep an eye on those teams. Because those are the teams that I think could aggressively be pursuing De'Aaron Fox. If I were to put my money on it right now, I still feel pretty confident that a deal is not going to get done before the trade deadline, because I do think the Kings could play the waiting game and potentially get more in this offseason. They still have Fox under contract for a whole nother year. And again, Fox is not demanding to be traded. So they still have time. So they don't have to make a move today and bend to the whims of another team right now. But then again, if a team in the next 9 days makes you an offer that you feel you can't refuse, that reality is a lot more possible today than it was even last night after Fox dropped 30 in the Kings win over the Brooklyn Nets.
If you were worried about Kirby Yates, worry no more. It appears the deal is going through.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Kirby Yates, we hadn't heard much since the initial reports a little over a week ago that he was signing with the Dodgers. Maybe some people were starting to get concerned. We tried to quell some of those concerns a little bit on yesterday's episode. And, other than the Dodgers not making it officially official, it's Jeff Passan official, which is pretty much good enough for us these days.
Yeah, Mark Feinsand first reported tonight that Yates had passed the physical, and then Jeff Passan stepped in. And once Passan is on board, then it's real. He is probably the only guy on the beat who hasn't humiliated himself, because he is very careful to not speculate and just report news when it's actually real. And so you can always feel good. And then Fabian Ardaya confirmed it through his sources. So plenty of people in agreement on this. It's a 1-year deal, $13 million with two potential bonuses, $500,000 at 50 games pitched and another $500,000 at 55 games pitched. So potentially up to $14 million total for the 1 year, which is perfectly reasonable for a guy as good as he was last year. Obviously, his age was the main factor in it only being a 1-year deal. But Dodgers have had decent success in the last several years of signing older guys with good stuff and getting a lot out of them. And I wouldn't be surprised if this does turn into a 2 or 3 year stint with the Dodgers for Kirby Yates, if all goes well in 2025. But it's, I haven't seen as much crying on the internet about this one. And maybe that's because it was announced last week. Maybe people got all their Kirby Yates tears out last week. Or maybe it's just because the fact is it's January 28th. Kirby Yates has been a free agent for November, December, January, 3 months. And, if somebody wanted to sign him, there was plenty of options. I would like to think that people are starting to realize maybe this is on the other teams that aren't doing anything. Obviously, that's a pipe dream. People aren't going to realize that because hating the Dodgers is a very popular cottage industry these days. But hey, the Padres did finally make a move. They signed Elias Diaz. So woohoo. Teams are trying. Dodgers just seem to be trying a lot harder than everybody else.
Yeah, when we talked about this, when it initially happened, we weren't sure of terms or anything. 13 mil doesn't sound, out of the realm of what I thought. I could have seen it being 15 mil and still being okay with it as long as it was a 1-year deal. The incentives are there for him. Like there's an extra $1 million if you can stay healthy, and if you're healthy, the Dodgers are probably going to use you. So that makes sense for him. And when it comes to the age, like his game's not built on velocity, and I think that's one of the biggest parts of why you can still see him, having success. He's very, very red on his baseball savant page in terms of high percentiles, but his fastball velocity is only in the 35th percentile. Like he doesn't throw that hard, but the movement, whatever else he had, the off-speed pitches, everything that he combines, he's a good pitcher. And when you're a good pitcher, and you're able to combine the chase rate, strikeout percentage, and if you combine good strikeout percentage with the fact that you don't allow the ball to be hard hit very often, that's a recipe for success, especially as a reliever in the later innings. And, you would imagine he'd only get better with the Dodgers, helping him out with his arsenal.
Yeah, hopefully. And yeah, like you said, when your game isn't built entirely on fastball velocity, obviously his changeup is his big pitch. And in order to have an effective changeup, you need to have at least a nominally effective fastball to play off of, but also the movement on the changeup is a big thing too. The deception, as long as you have that separation. And we saw it with Clayton Kershaw. As his fastball velocity dropped, so did his slider and curveball velocity drop a little bit to maintain that separation, and he was able to remain effective. So yeah, I'm excited to see what Kirby Yates can do. It's kind of interesting to me. I remember when the Dodgers re-signed Teoscar Hernandez, I said, okay, now the offseason, the Dodgers have checked all the boxes they needed to check. They had holes, and they, added Blake Snell. They re-signed Blake Treinen, and now Teoscar Hernandez is like they had completed the offseason. Since the Dodgers completed their offseason, they signed Hae-Sung Kim and Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates. And Roki Sasaki. Yeah, so the Dodgers have added the 2 best relief pitchers on the market, one of the best starting pitchers on the market, and a very promising Japanese infielder since they had finished. What's that? Korean. Sorry. Yeah. Since they had finished checking all the boxes they needed to check this offseason.
Yeah, it's been, the Dodgers, you could have graded their offseason after Teoscar, probably would have been A, or at the very least a B. You could have continued grading that after every signing, and it would have continued to be an A, or even if you're a tough evaluator, a B, or just not objective. But it's great, and we're starting the year where, like we've talked about with the roster, we're starting the year with not who's gonna make the 26 man, just who's gonna stay on the 40 man, and there is still a couple guys that make sense. We got the report that they were, shopping Ryan Brazier and stuff like that.
Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bet as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. And the app is easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. One bet you can look at, $5. The NBA tonight, Kings head east to take on the Sixers. Even amid all the turmoil with De'Aaron Fox, FanDuel has the Kings favored by 7. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
The Miami Heat are motivated to trade Jimmy Butler.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast.
Have to start with the latest on Jimmy Butler trade talks. The Heat have reportedly lowered their asking price for Jimmy Butler and are taking calls from teams other than the Phoenix Suns. Teams like the Milwaukee Bucks and the Memphis Grizzlies continue to be mentioned as potential suitors, and the Heat have reportedly loosened their stance on what they want in a Butler deal. The Heat had previously been looking for good role players who could help them win now, draft capital, and they did not want to take back any salary beyond 2026. But now they might be open to deals that don't fall within those parameters. Brian Windhorst on Tuesday went so far as to say that Jimmy Butler will get traded. So, David, what do you think the Heat can realistically hope for in return for Jimmy?
That's a huge question mark. I think when you look at what they're willing to kind of let go of some of the tight restrictions in terms of what they'd get back for Jimmy Butler, what is the most likely scenario? That they're going to get some kind of role player. They're going to want draft capital. I think it's the restrictions regarding salary beyond 2026. And we're already hearing, 2026 is the golden time where you can already start planning your next acquisition, Luka Doncic, et cetera. There's big names that might become available in 2026. But I think from Miami's perspective, you can't afford to give up on acquiring players that can help this team win now, because you have to be in the playoff hunt. And you also have to acquire draft capital. If there's anything, if you wind up getting salary back that might be able to dip into that 2026 era, that doesn't work. Like, you can already start clearing. You can clear the books next year. You can clear the books at some other point down the road. Kick that can down till some other time. It's not feasible. We've seen too many teams clear cap space and wind up with absolutely nothing to show for it. And I think from Miami's perspective, that's where you can really kind of say, you know what, we don't care. What if we have somebody on the books for $30 million a year beyond 2026? We'll figure something out. We'll find another way to clear that salary eventually. And especially if you're able to get more draft capital in return, if that requires a trade or something in order to unload those players or that player, that's the strategy there. But you need to be able to get something of someone of value that can help this team this year, and also draft capital. I think that's the most important thing. And you're not going to get all three of those things.
To your point, I'm hoping at this point that you get any of those things, right? And so, but if to your point about 2026, I think I'm with you here. I understood. Look, we're going to trade Jimmy Butler. We're not going to get a superstar back for Jimmy Butler. We're probably not going to get that number one pick back for Jimmy Butler. We're not going to go get that blue chip young prospect for Jimmy Butler. So we need some sort of avenue to get that next superstar player. And Miami clearly circled 2026 because we know what the free agent class looks like. But let's also be realistic about it. Superstars don't move via free agency anymore. And Miami's entire strategy for, I think, for most of the Jimmy Butler era has been hoping and dreaming. Hoping and dreaming that Damian Lillard falls in your lap. Hoping and dreaming that Kevin Durant falls in your lap. Hoping and dreaming that star player X falls in your lap. And all that hoping and dreaming got them nowhere but here, to this, broken relationship, essentially where they're at. And yes, they made 2 finals, but no championships to show for it. That's where they ended up with it. And if the strategy for another 2 years is going to be hoping and dreaming, as a Heat fan, that does not make me feel very good. Now, it's a little bit different because at least you're planning for that cap space, but as opposed to hoping and dreaming for one of these players to force your way. But like I just said, superstars don't become free agents anymore. They figure out where they want to go.
You just mentioned. Yeah, those players you just mentioned, they were all traded. Lillard, Durant,
Yeah.
they were moved.
And let's look at the names in 2026. De'Aaron Fox is one that's always mentioned. It looks like he's going to get traded. So I'm imagining he's going to sign that extension. He's not going to be a free agent in 2026. Do we really think Luka Doncic is going to be a free agent in 2026? Maybe. But I'm not, again, hoping and dreaming for that. Kevin Durant, I know he's going to be a name that's out there. I don't know if I want Kevin Durant at 37 or 38 years old, right? Like that's going to be a very different Kevin Durant than what we even have now, who already has availability concerns and all these things. And then you kind of look down the other names. Jaren Jackson Jr. is out there. Is that the guy that's worth planning for 2 years in advance? I mean, Jaren Jackson's an awesome player. I'm not planning I'm not wasting 2 years just waiting for him to become a free agent and hoping that he's not going to sign some sort of extension where he's clearly very happy, or at least right now in Memphis. Is Trae Young that player that you're like? Nobody even wanted to trade for Trae Young when his asking price was worse than DeJounte Murray's 6 months ago. And now we're going to wait around for 2 years hoping that he becomes a free agent. At this point, I'm with you. I would say, look, if we can have the space in 2026, great. But if there's an opportunity to go get even a high-level role player who's a good fit with Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo and Khalil Ware in this group, go ahead and do it, and then figure out 2026 in 2026. And the other part of this, too, is because these players don't enter free agency anymore, you will actually need salary to go ahead and trade for these guys when they become available, right? And so if the option is something like, I don't know, I'm going to take two names and just don't take these names to mean anything other than just names on contracts. Bruce Brown on an expiring contract versus like Chris Middleton with another year left on his deal, and that does expire in 2026. It could make more sense for Miami to take the Middleton contract, despite the fact that it doesn't expire for another year after Bruce Brown's contract. Because if Bruce Brown's contract expires this summer, you can't use that to facilitate a trade anymore, unless it's on a complicated sign and trade and blah, blah, and that gets weird. But with Middleton, he becomes an expiring contract next year. Ditto for a player that's under contract through 2026. Like that player can become an expiring contract in 2026, 2027, and you could potentially use that player to facilitate another trade. And you don't have to part with a core piece like Hero or Bam in order to make, or potentially you don't have to part with those players in order to make that big swing. So I'm with for whatever the Heat are looking for. At this point, my priority is whatever I get in return, as long as it's not Jimmy Butler and not Bradley Beal, I'm happy with it. Because the one thing with like you still can't take Beal because of the no trade clause. That still cannot be an option. But as long as it's not Jimmy Butler or not Bradley Beal, sign me up. Whatever it is, I'm good.
Cap space can't be the centerpiece of your plan, because that doesn't work. Like, I mean, Philadelphia did it, and they probably regret having done it, And so we're even hearing rumblings that Philadelphia might be interested in trading Paul George just to acquire Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, can't do that one.
To reunite Butler with Embiid. What's that?
I wouldn't do that one either, for the record.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan. So they're loosening the restrictions on what they want. That was probably already going to be the case, but it also highlights the urgency with which this team is moving. As Windhorst was reporting, they're going to want to move him. They're going to take every call, make every call imaginable.
When he says that Jimmy Butler will get traded, I find that very interesting. Are we at the situation now where the Heat have offers on the table and they're just waiting for the best of the worst offers? Because whatever they should have traded him in the summer. I've been on that for a long time. Those offers would have been way better than what it would have been now. But understanding that the offers are what they are now, is it just like, and by them openly saying, hey, we've lowered our asking price here, that gets other non-Phoenix teams to get back on the phone. And a team like the Warriors, who might have not wanted to part with somebody like Jonathan Kuminga, because when Steve Kerr and Steph and Draymond are out here saying we don't want to mortgage the future, I actually do tend to believe them. I don't think that that's just a talking point. But what if you don't have to mortgage the future if you're Golden State now, right? And now it's just like, okay, here's some salary for Jimmy Butler. Like that, now you've reopened those lines of communication. You've reopened those trade negotiations with teams like Golden State, like Milwaukee, maybe even potentially Memphis. I wonder if the Heat have offers and now they're just waiting because they suspended Jimmy Butler indefinitely They actually don't have to rush. They can take this all the way to February 6th. But now they're just waiting for the best of the worst offers to come in.
I think that's exactly the plan. I think now they've given themselves a little room. They freed themselves of the on-court distraction, the talk about whether or not he's going to attend, where he's going to play, what his role is going to be, et cetera. It's like, you know what? Don't even come back. I would be surprised at this point if we even see him kind of welcome back into the practice facility, because I think that bridge may have burned a little bit. I don't know. I don't know. I know he came back. Yeah, Jimmy.
He's suspended. Why would he practice for what?
Well, you know what I mean. Like, we saw him, playing with Paul Pogba, playing dominoes with his agent in the locker room, et cetera. Like, I mean,
those dominoes games, I would imagine, have been shifted to the casa there. The casa. And, I think that's a
yeah.
I think
that's to be a little bit more homebound.
Yeah.
So now you can just kind of say, we have all these days to kind of figure out different deals, different policies, different permutations, different combinations of sending players here, there. Like, it's going to be active from the Heat front office perspective, and they're probably going to be talking to every team in the league to try and get a little something here and there. And we know Pat Riley certainly isn't shy about having these kind of multi-team trades. My feeling would be probably that we'll start to hear rumblings of it the day of the trade deadline. I wouldn't be surprised if that's when we start to hear.
Take it all the way down there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Take it down to the last stretch, because that's that sense of urgency. It again, these things happen over the course of days and weeks, and obviously it's been a long process for everybody involved. But I think when you get close to that deadline, maybe you won't get that extra second round pick, or maybe you don't want to give up that player, but you do wind up giving him up because that's the only way to get any deal.
Right, that's when the best offers come in, right? And that tends to be what happens here. And other things change.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy. I used to go to comedy shows all the time. Me and my friends in college used to go all the time. It's a blast. You don't even need, alcohol. You just go and have fun and laugh. It's a comedy show. That's the whole point. Just go have fun. Gametime has a new called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
It was an absolute classic. Baylor fought till the end.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears.
Bears lose this one to BYU by 4 in overtime. And it's one that looked like it was over a lot earlier than it actually was. I hate saying this. I really hate saying this for a game that my team loses. But what an unbelievable college basketball game this was tonight. Like, this was the very best of the Big 12 in terms of, atmosphere and shot making, and two teams that are desperate for a big win. Two teams that kind of understand the what is the word I'm looking for here? To understand how pressing this is to start getting some big wins. BYU certainly needs one. In fact, Baylor's get the St. John's win. BYU doesn't have that. And just high-end stuff, high-end shot making, unbelievable offensive display. Best I think we've seen Baylor offensively in a month and a half, maybe more, since they were playing high schools at the end of December. But they don't get the win. And at the end of the day, that is what matters. And so I'm sure a lot of you probably went through this as well, where, they're down double digits at one point and you're like pissed. Like, I was pissed, man. I'm so sick of these scheduled losses that's been on the table for the last 2 years here. And then they fight back and they have opportunities to win the game, and they throw a couple opportunities away, but they force it into overtime. They execute well down the stretch for the most part. And so you're kind of like, well, damn, what a fight though. What a fight. But at the end of the day, it's a loss. And so I can't I talked about it kind of this whole week of I hate the excuse making. And so I can't sit here and make the excuse of like, well, it was a hell of a fight. They lost. And I'd like to think that they're a better team than BYU. And they didn't beat them. And you still are living on that 8-9 line of the NCAA tournament. And that win, that buzzer-beating win in double overtime against St. John's in November is not going to get you into the tournament. You can't just have that alone. And so Baylor is still searching for that signature quad one win. I know, Cincinnati might be a quad one win. I don't know how to follow it anymore. But you know what I mean. That signature win over a ranked team where they actually look like a tournament team. BYU probably just got that with Baylor, because I think other people think of Baylor more highly than we do, the way that they've been playing right now. But it's a loss. There were some good performances in there. There was some good fight, but they lost. And Rob Wright and VJ Edgecombe were outstanding in this game. VJ really from minute 1 to 45 was your best player. Rob was obviously tremendous down the stretch. Just the cojones on that kid, man. Like I said it with Hatch on the show earlier today of like he hasn't done anything to prove that he can't do it in a big time environment. And he went out there and did it in a big time environment again. Like the kid just doesn't back down from anything. That's a tough SOB right there. And it was okay the first 30 minutes of the game. And then he goes nuclear the last 10 minutes and almost drags them into overtime, offensively anyway, drags them into overtime by himself. And scores whatever, the last 10 or 12 points for Baylor in regulation. VJ was awesome tonight again. Like this is the VJ. Like this is the VJ Edgecombe that we were promised. We're getting it the last 3 or 4 games, specifically the last 3. He goes for what, 30, 21, and now 28. He's hitting threes out there. 6 of 8 from 3 tonight. This kid, he was a brick from beyond the arc earlier this year. And suddenly, before February, he's the best 3-point shooter on the team. 6 of 8 from 3. Jaden Nunn gave you some big baskets. I got to give it to him. Still wasn't a great game from him, but gave you some big baskets tonight. Let's stick with the positive right now in terms of who played well. And let's look at the BYU side. Obviously, Richie Saunders had some big ones down the stretch, but it was all Cannon Catchings, man. It was the Cannon Catchings show. I mean, 23 points, 8 of 8 from the floor, 4 of 4 from 3. The guy was absolutely perfect. Now, he only played 25 minutes out of 45, but he gave enough of a heat check to kind of keep Baylor at arm's length when BYU needed him to. And I mean, the kid was incredible. Like, I was genuinely thinking, I'm like, are we watching 2018 James Harden right now? Like, dude, without the foul baiting, like he was incredible in this game. You know, the freshmen played well for Baylor, but it's the old guys that I would want to step up in this game. And no one player lost this game for Baylor, but damn, Norchad Omier came close. I mean, I thought I was putting it lightly on Twitter by saying it's not one for the scrapbook. He was awful tonight. 12 and 8, but shoots 1 of 5 from 3, committing silly fouls. 2 of them were ticky-tack calls, but that last one where he fouls out is so stupid. Like, Demon did nothing in this game, and he's fouling him from beyond the arc. Like, what in the hell are you doing? And the first or second one he had in the game was the same thing. He's fouling a guy 35 feet from the basket. And Scott Drew's just like, use your head, man. And he had some good defense at times, but, I mean, he's 1 of 5 from 3. He's shooting a 3 when they're down like 5 or 6 in the final 2 minutes of the game. Just killing him, man. He's shooting shots from behind the backboard and turning it over. Like, he killed them tonight. Killed them. What is going on? I thought he had an illness a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. This is beyond that. This is like 5 bad games in a row for him. Have they figured him out? NCAA's active leading rebounder, and he gets 8 in 45 minutes. He had about 2 with 10 minutes left in the game. Regulation, anyway. He stunk tonight. Stunk. And he bailed them out. He bailed BYU out a couple times. Bailed Demon out in that overtime one I was just talking about. But my God, man. Just it was a net negative tonight. Just wasn't really good at anything. And missed free throws. How many missed free throws do they have? Norchad misses 2 in overtime. Massive free throws. Baylor ends up shooting 16 of 24 from the free throw line. What was Rob Wright? 8 for 8. Everyone else was 50%. Everyone else on Baylor's team was 8 for 16. Rob Wright, the freshman, the reclassified freshman, was the only one who had the balls to hit his damn free throws. 2 at the end of regulation to send this thing into overtime. The only one with nuts dragging on the floor. Because it's all mental. Everyone can hit free throws. But Rob Wright goes into the teeth of that environment and does it. And everyone else completely folds. 50% from the free throw line outside of your freshman point guard. Give me a break. That's a joke. And for some reason, this program, they can't freaking figure it out. They cannot hit free throws at the end of games. God, it's like your high school basketball team all over again. What in the hell, man? Get it together. It's like, it's just crazy. You watch this game tonight and you're thinking, the only 2 guys on this team with killer instincts are freshmen. Edgecombe and Wright, and that's it. So, yeah, it was good that they fought back into this game, and I love that they did, and they sent it to overtime, but they lost. And they probably should have lost by the way the game was going. 11 points down, 13 points down, but they also could have won that game because I think they're the better team. While they're not a great team, they're a better team, and they missed some crucial free throws down the stretch. It's just not an excuse. And again, to go back to where I started with this, I'm just so gosh darn sick of the excuses. I'm sick of them. And it's not just this year. It was last year, and it was 23 as well. Every time there's a scheduled loss, they lose. Oh, well, it's a tough road environment. Oh, well, we're a couple guys down. You've been shorthanded for 3 games now. You won the other ones. Like, how much better is BYU than Utah? They lost to Utah last week. So, like, that's not an excuse anymore. And let's face it, like, if that is your excuse that they're shorthanded, get used to it. This is the second time Jeremy Roach has been in the concussion protocol. Langston Love's been day-to-day for 3 years now. It's not getting any better. You're not getting any stronger. And yeah, you can say, oh, it's great that we won shorthanded against Kansas State and Utah. And then when you lose, it's, oh, we're shorthanded. Oh, it's a tough road environment. Oh, just another night in the Big 12. I'm so sick of it. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the scheduled losses. 2019, 2020, 21, 22, they didn't do that. They went on the road and they won those games. And I get we're talking about some of the greatest Baylor teams of all time when I'm talking about those years. But these teams the last 3 years are just as talented. But they're not putting it together. They went on the road and they won those games. And I get we're talking about some of the greatest Baylor teams of all time when I'm talking about those years. But these teams the last 3 years are just as talented. But they're not putting it together.
Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bet as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. And the app is easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. One bet you can look at, $5. The NBA tonight, Kings head east to take on the Sixers. Even amid all the turmoil with De'Aaron Fox, FanDuel has the Kings favored by 7. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5. And if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
The Dallas Cowboys made 2 massive hires on Tuesday.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast.
2 big hires that the Cowboys have made on Tuesday. Let's start with Matt Eberflus, who was kind of announced on Friday night that he was going to be the defensive coordinator. And then it was like, oh yeah, we have to follow these rules before we can announce that. Tom Pelissero is reporting that the Cowboys and Eberflus are expected to reach a deal by the end of today. It's going to happen. First of all, what do you think about the Eberflus hire? Now that you've had some time to think about it, research, are you feeling good about the hire?
I think it's, the details are going to be important here, right? And I think it's an interesting hire to say the least. It's not a surprising hire in the sense that it very much follows kind of a template that the Cowboys are looking for. And they love these kind of former head coaches that have a ton of experience. Even in the head coaching search, we got word that they were looking originally to hire a defensive head coach. I think that they just prefer these kind of older, seen it all defensive coordinators that have been around the league, have been head coaches. And I think it also provides you like a backup plan in case things, you think you have to
backstop, right? Like you don't have a bunch of completely unknown guys on the roster, right?
Yeah, and again, for a guy like Shoddy, who we've talked about, he has a ton of experience. He's been around the league, but he's never been a head coach before. So having another guy that on the coaching staff that has had head coaching experience, it doesn't really matter if it's positive or negative. Just having that experience, I think, is someone that it's going to be important. As far as Eberflus, the actual coach himself, and who he is, I think I was surprised, but again, more just because of the way he left Dallas, less than his qualifications. I think that he comes back and look, it makes some sense, looking at the situation after having only a single year with Mike Zimmer. If you aren't going to bring back Mike Zimmer, it makes some sense to kind of fall back towards 4 rusher, 7 drop, system that is back to a cover 3, cover 1 type system that you are comfortable with, that you previously had under Quinn. Now things are definitely not exactly the same. These aren't exactly the same defenses. This is more of a Rod Marinelli flavor of that branching of the Tampa 2 coaches, right? But I think as far as the principles of playing fast, of a simplified defense that you're focusing more on individual techniques as opposed to complicated, sim pressures and blitzes and that sort of thing. I think it makes sense if you're trying to hit the ground running and try to get back up and going quickly because, as we saw at the beginning of last year with Zim's defense and frankly, again, my concern originally with something like what happened with Zim's defense was it could take a little while for guys to kind of internalize that stuff. I'm thinking that by making a move with Eberflus, it's closer to something that's familiar with a lot of guys on this defense, and that the hope is that at least for the starters, they can kind of hit the ground running because you're hitting the ground with something familiar.
I do think it's going to help. I think they're going to have a lot of turnover on the defensive side of the ball in terms of talent this offseason. We already know DeMarvion Overshown is going to miss a lot of time. Trayvon Diggs is going to miss some time. You're going to lose some free agents. So having a simpler defensive scheme, I think, will help rookie second-year guys get up to speed. My concern is when you get to the postseason and you're playing some of these better quarterbacks, assuming the Cowboys make it to the postseason, is this the style of defense that matches up well to stopping the Jaden Daniels and the Jalen Hurts and the Matt Staffords? What do you think?
That's a good question, because it does have elements. I will say this, like there are elements of what he likes to do, Eberflus likes to do versus Quinn that have some roots closer to a Fangio type defense, right? Like this is a guy that does like to call a lot of cover two, a lot of shell coverage at times. He will mix it up. I think that the big difference between Fangio and Eberflus is that Fangio is a master at rocking and rolling his safeties, at disguising coverages pre-snap, and then kind of giving you alternate looks and really kind of keeping you guessing about when he's calling cover two. Whereas Eberflus hasn't necessarily been traditionally that guy. I mean, I think there's been a trend these last 3 years with Eberflus towards more modern defense, less an increase of pass blitzes, less run stunts. I think he's using more quarters coverage to deal with modern quarterbacks that like to run the ball a little bit more so he can get more eyes on the quarterback. But the one area where I would say that he kind of still is lagging behind, it just based on numbers and tape breakdown that I've been able to do so far, is in sim pressures and in the kind of fooling the quarterback pre-snap that is obviously a main component of some of the top defenses in the NFL right now.
I just wanted to share a note. I have a friend who his job is to scout the NFC North for a team. Here's what he said about Eberflus. He said he's a good defensive coordinator if he's not being asked to lead an entire locker room. It takes some away. And if you can continue to take some of his aggression from last year's defense in Chicago with more blitzes, I think he's going to be a very good addition for the Cowboys. Outstanding red zone defense, just a little conservative in between the 20s and late in games. That's where it reminds me a lot of Vic Fangio. There, like we see at the end of these game situations, like Fangio's defense you can move the ball up and down the field, but they almost always hold the red zone. Big emphasis on the linebackers and the secondary. And that's my question is like, what is that going to look like with the Cowboys in 2025? Because they've got so many injuries and free agents at those two spots. How quickly can he get those two units to play at an average level will probably determine their success next year.
Absolutely. And I think, what are you going to get out of the defensive line? I mean, I think that's really the big question. You still have a weakness in the defensive interior, and that's got to be filled, especially now with this defense. I mean, look, again, a re-emphasis back on the three technique, and your starting three technique is a free agent. So they've got to figure that position out first and foremost.
Which, by the way, do you think Osa is a good fit in this defense? Because I was looking back, like historically, with Eberflus, and he's almost always had like these 6'6", 310-pound three techniques, like whether it was DeForest Buckner or Gervin Dexter with the Bears this year. Like, do we think a 6'1", 285-pound Osa Odighizuwa makes sense?
I think it does, but I think it certainly can't be your only solution. And I don't think that you can put him out there on a 65 snap basis, like
Probably
he
not.
needs to be heavily rotated and look, I think no matter what scheme you're playing, I've said this for a while, no matter what scheme you're playing, and if you bring back Osa Odighizuwa, you still need a defensive tackle coming out of this draft. So they've got work to do in the defensive interior still. I still have a lot of faith in Mozzie Smith maybe taking a step, getting a full offseason to actually work out a little bit, despite going through now his third defensive coordinator in 3 years. But I still think you need more at the position, whether that's a free agent or draft pick, regardless. And I think that is something that, regardless of who the defensive coordinator was, you needed that. But especially since Eberflus put such an emphasis on interior pass rush, you're going to need more bodies there.
So I'm giving this hire like a B, a solid B, because I'm not sure how many other options out there I would have liked more. I would have loved Mike Zimmer, but it's clear he doesn't want to return. So I think all things considered, this is a very good hire for the Cowboys. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could go either way, honestly. I like the way that I think if I was getting Matt Eberflus from like 3 or 4 years ago when he left the Colts, now I would be like, but I think he's changed some things about him. I think your source had really great points. He's become more aggressive on third downs. He's opened up to blitzing on passing situations. There's been an increase all 3 years that he was there with the Bears. So I think he's a guy that's probably in the middle of his Quinn, kind of revolution that like Quinn after Atlanta, right? So I do like the way he's trending, and I think he's a solid pick for all the other reasons we mentioned before.